Welcome back to the second episode of Bowl SSE. I, Ishita Jain, your today's host on behalf of enactors Sri Aurobindo, I'm here to kickstart our next episode of the podcast entitled as Bowl SSE. I welcome all of you and duly extend my heartiest greetings to all. As the famous phrase goes, today's world is shrinking. And a direct implication of that is there is no such field knowing about which will be of no use to you. Every topic is meant to be unraveled. Every stone is meant to be turned. Being said so, we are here to embark on this journey through this series of podcasts. So today we have with us Mr. Arun Krishnamurthy, an Indian environmental activist who has initiated the campaign of cleaning various lakes across India. In recent times, people mostly focus on a comfortable life in the future with a well-paid job. Walking along the road not taken, Mr. Krishnamurthy gave up his job at Google to contribute all his time and effort to the conservation of water bodies. He is known for founding the NGO, Environmentalist Foundation of India, in 2011, based in Chennai, which has its branches in other cities such as Hyderabad, Delhi, and Coimbatore. Mr. Krishnamurthy, with the organization, has been successful in cleaning at least 39 lakes in the country. He was chosen as among the five people for prestigious Rolex Awards for Enterprise Award in 2012 for scientific lake restoration in Chennai. So, we are extremely privileged to have one of the most eminent personalities in the field of environment. Climate change and the subsequent water crisis has been affecting millions of lives across the world. Even in India, many states are facing a severe scarcity of water. Yet, when it comes to taking action, the population is hesitant on making an effort. At a time when public participation becomes the only counter to the problems, young leaders like Mr. Arun Krishnamurthy are the ones that bring about a revolution. We have him today to instigate all of the listeners and viewers with the dynamics of flood management in India. We are honored to have you here, sir. It will be really great pleasure to start on a note wherein you can explain to us the dynamics of flood management in India.
Thank you, Ishitaji, for that kind introduction. And many congratulations to all student members who've actually taken on such a task of putting together a podcast where we're discussing some vital topics, especially during a pandemic. Because the focus is so on issues that we can only relate to our own selves, our own problems. Often, many other important topics get forgotten. And I'm truly excited that a student body such as yours, a part of an educational institution such as yours, has actually put in an effort to discuss floods when we are in the peak of summer. Often, the social mindset, is to look at a problem when the problem happens, not ahead of it. And the best example for that would be the second wave of the pandemic, unfortunately, because of which many of us are affected, losing loved ones. And it's only because of preparedness we are being told that we are caught unaware. That's exactly the analogy that I would draw for the flood management too. Whether it's Chennai, Hyderabad, Bangalore, Uttarakhand's flash floods, or any part of urban India where rivers are in spate due to cloudburst, where lakes and ponds of the urban center spill over because we have taken up land that belongs to watersheds, where we've reclaimed land and we've built upon, we're often caught unaware that a flood of this magnitude is possible. The most recent example would be that from Hyderabad of last year, when the city of Hyderabad, if all of you are aware of the terrain, it's a beautiful landscape with tiny hillocks and an undulation that is not common to Bombay, Kolkata, or Chennai. It's a city which is up and down with several hillocks, as I mentioned. And often, Hyderabad faces severe acute water shortage, especially regions like Hasmatpet near Sikandrabad. These are pockets where how many ever feet you plow the ground below, you will not find water and bone dry belts. Often people were of the idea that Hyderabad would never get flooded, but that's not so true. When we look 100 years ago, 150 years ago, during the Nizam period, There is a renowned engineer by name Sri Vishweswaraya, the great mind behind the construction of the Krishnaraja Sagar Dam in Mysore, or the man behind several such structures in Bihar across the Ganga River. This individual, this engineer, a leader of future India, way back then had futuristic vision on water management, how to prevent floods, and how to ensure that we keep our urban spaces free from inundation and flooding during such heavy downpours. Hyderabad used to get flooded year after year only because the city did not have a proper water management in place. At the same time, 3 months, 4 months after the floods, the city would face acute water shortage. Shri Vishweswaraya saw an imbalance in this water management and distribution system. All that he did with the help of the Nizams, the rulers of that day, was to establish a reservoir project for Hyderabad. The Osman Sagar, the Himayat Sagar, and several water bodies were developed in the outer periphery of Hyderabad city, and there were canal systems that were developed from one lake to the other, all of which were draining into either another lake or into a larger system which would feed the Musi River. The Musi River, the Meeti River, the Kuvam, the Adayar, these are all rivers of urban India. The names that I just mentioned, Meeti in Mumbai, Musi in Hyderabad, or Kuvam Adayar in Chennai, or for example, all these rivers have a responsibility in water management. But often what's misunderstood is these streams are taken for granted, and we just dump our urban solid and liquid waste into them, and we forget that these channels, these canal systems have a responsibility towards drought mitigation, towards flood management, because it's not about everyday activity that we have to be worried. It's about these unfortunate, untoward incidences which could happen as an accident. And that's exactly what's happening with regards to cloudbursts or heavy downpours. And at that point in time, we cannot establish a new canal system to take the excess water. We have to be prepared. And that's what was achieved in Hyderabad through the Himayat Sagar, Osman Sagar reservoir systems, which were created in the city's outer periphery, and the canal systems which would take the excess water during the monsoons into the Musi River, which would further drain out of the city and go merge with the Krishna River, thereby into the Bay of Bengal. Look at how intricate a water management system was developed 100 years ago, 150 years ago, when the so-called modern technology was not available. Machinery that's available today was not available back then. But despite that, humongous projects, ambitious projects such as those were possible simply because the human mind was capable of innovating. The human mind was capable of having futuristic thoughts. That's exactly where we are going wrong today. In today's perspective, everything is so short lived and everything is easily forgotten. That is why the Chennai floods of 2015 or the Hyderabad floods of 2020 are already a distant memory, because we don't understand water management at the level at which it should be comprehended. Take Bihar, for example, as a state. Most of the upper reaches of the Himalayas, Nepal, all the water that drains into the floodplains of Bihar, and because of excess siltation, because of agrarian activity, we see the course of rivers changing. We see the course of the entire watershed being mismanaged, which leads to massive floods year after year. And that is where we have a new challenge at hand, which is the cloudburst phenomena which we are experiencing because of climate change. Climate change is in our backyards like nowhere else in the world. Uttarakhand, Chennai are best examples for this. Take into consideration the last 6 to 7 years. The first big flash floods of Kedarnath, Sri Badrinath that we witnessed, where we saw boulders come rolling down, where we saw humongous amounts of water being dumped in Uttarakhand in a very short span. And in the last 1 year, we've seen, or not even 1 year, in the last 6 months, we've seen two instances of that happen again. And when we look at such instances of natural occurrence of heavy downpour in a very short span, often human life and property that's on the path of water, he gets hit firsthand. And that's where we need to reimagine our course of living. And I very carefully choose the words course of living because riverfront development, watershed redevelopment is not a scientific methodology for urban expansion, is not a way forward for human inhabitation. These are things we definitely have to take into consideration because today any lake, pond, river restoration is done in an aesthetic manner appealing to the human eye, which caters to our entertainment purposes. But nobody is considered about the ecological purposes of a water body such as this. Nobody is taking into consideration the environmental damages that one has to bear with in the course of altering a water body's responsibility. All of us want a jogging track around water bodies. We want concrete floors on the banks of the river where we can sit, read a book, or we want structures developed which would make the water body look colorful, which would make the water body look beautiful for a picture spot. But nobody understands what is the soil structure, how are we maintaining the balance of hydro levels, and how are we looking at the different life forms of that particular habitat. How are we making sure that the water body is capable of being dry at the same time, carrying enough and more waters that it should receive in an abnormal condition? This is exactly where we are failing in our flood mitigation or management, whether it's Bihar, Uttarakhand, Kerala, Chennai, Hyderabad, anywhere in this country, simply because the forethought and the futuristic vision is missing in action. We talk a lot of science, but we execute very minimal of it when it comes to field management. I'll give you an example. There is a place called Kavalapara in Kerala. This is in near Wayanad. And for those of you who are not aware of Wayanad, Wayanad is part, a major portion of Wayanad is part of the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve, India's largest biosphere reserve. And this is in the tri-junction of three states, Kerala, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu. We're looking at tiger reserves such as the Mudumalai Tiger Reserve in Tamil Nadu, the Kabini Tiger Reserve in the Bandipur Tiger Reserve in Karnataka, and we are also looking at several pockets of dense jungle in Kerala. So this entire biosphere reserve is spread across the three meeting point, the tri-junction meeting point of the three states of Kerala, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu. But take into example the last 20 years. I'm talking about dense jungle that none of us here on the call who are from an urban center would be even able to imagine. We're talking about hills, untouched virgin forest, fresh streams of water where the river Kaveri originates. So it's a jungle where you have leopards, tigers, elephants, and so many different life forms, a biodiversity that is extremely difficult for us to even understand or imagine. In one such a habitat, we are just cutting down forest to develop tea estates, coffee estates, holiday homes, and we're just going on a rampage. We're going on a rampage where people with money are buying huge estates. And then what are we doing? We're having electrified fences to protect our property, and we're cutting down the hills to make roadways. And Kavalapara, the extremely unfortunate landslide that Kerala witnessed 3-4 years ago during the heavy rains was because a whole hill came crashing down because the vegetation was cut. The vegetation was no longer there to hold the soil and the rock boulders, and because of which an entire hill came crashing down, wiping out villages, killing almost tens and 20 people, and almost changing the entire topography. Have we learnt our lessons? No. Take into example, there is a cyclone in the west coast of India that's currently in action, and the last news bit I read was it was 100 kilometers off Goa coast, and so somewhere around 400 kilometers off the Mumbai radar. So we're looking at a cyclone which is brewing, and the entire west coast of our country, from Kerala to Gujarat, is in red alert. and read the news bulletin carefully. One item which they've repeatedly mentioned is landslides. Landslides don't happen without a reason. They happen when you have tampered with the natural topography of the region, where you've cut down the forests, where you've removed all the vegetation, where you've gone and built concrete structures in loose soil, where you have rock boulders which are not being able to hold back because the vegetation is no longer there. And with heavy rainfall, 15 centimeters, 20 centimeter rainfall in less than 24 hours period, such heavy impounding will cause extensive landslides. And if you and I believe that, oh, people would learn from such landslides, no, they don't. They're very happy if the mountain comes crashing down, because a year later the locals forget that a landslide happened. So the sand mafia could easily step in and eyewash people, brainwash people, saying, "Oh, we're just removing all the silt because it is causing hindrance to all of you." And then you sell that silt at millions of rupees. So you cut the tree because you wanted a hand, a grab of that silt which you could sell later. We are trying to make money every possible way. Now, who's thinking about the who's thinking about the floods? Who's thinking about the drought? No thought, no thought. And for those who are affected in places like Kavlapara, in Nilambur, a part of Wayanad, for them a livelihood is lost because they're working in that tea estate, they're working in that pepper garden, they're working in that rubber estate, and their livelihood depends on that. And if you're going to go try to sensitize them saying this is part of flood management, if you don't want to get flooded, if you don't want to witness a landslide that will wash away your home, such things should not happen. We need to leave this forest to be a virgin forest. You really think people are going to accept it? No, because there is no space for science, logic, when your livelihood is to be affected by it. That is the biggest challenge India as a developing country faces when it comes to natural resource management. Improper natural resource management, imbalance in resource distribution it's part of a vicious cycle which causes flooding, and that flooding causes furthermore imbalance. So we go on a cycle where we actually don't have a deeper understanding of the larger problem, which is natural resources of this country are to be treated with respect, and we cannot be greedy. And developmental model should focus on equal distribution of resources. And when we talk about equal distribution of resources, it's not just for human consumption, for every life form. The forest deserves 60% of the resources, so be it. Only if the forest survives will there be water. Only if there is water can vegetation hold on. Only if there's vegetation can we prevent instances like Kavlapara, where we're seeing large landslides happen. When landslides such as that is prevented, is when you'll actually see your rivers carry water as a perennial source. When that happens, is when the river stream and the canal system will remain as a hydro setup in people's mind, when we won't dump garbage or we won't dump liquid waste and encroach and build over it. And when we don't do that is only when a flash flood like situation will still be able to take the water through the course of the channel of that river or the canal system. Look how everything is intrinsically connected one after the other. We just can't wipe out India's flooding problem by reconstructing a canal system for 16 kilometers within Patna. Why did Patna get flooded? Patna, a historic city, the Ganges has been flowing in and around Patna for millions of years. How is Patna getting flooded in 2020? Why is Patna getting flooded? Simple. Upstream and downstream, you've hampered the course of the majestic Ganges, that you don't have respect for an inhabited urban landscape such as Patna, where you think a glass building and a concrete road is modernization, where we don't have a deeper understanding of the river system, and the city gets just flooded. And bridges which were inaugurated 7 months ago just get wiped out, just get washed off. That is the sturdity of structures that we're building today. And look at how our natural course has a memory. This is something which all of us is it's scientifically proven. Water has memory, and we don't have to give a spiritual tinge to it. We don't have to give a superstitious tinge to it. It's simple scientific logic. Water flows from a higher region to a lower region. And that is the memory that we are all talking about. Whether it's around Patna, whether it's in Nilambur, Kerala, look at where water is finding its way. Water is just going from an upper reach to a downtrodden spot. And when water is trying to do that, it just carries everything that's on its path. It doesn't distinguish on religion, caste, economics, or whether you've newly built it, whether it's an heritage structure. Water just carries everything and anything that's on its path. This is where our flood management has to be redrawn with strategies where the younger audience greatly understands where is the Yamuna originating. What is the point of merging at Delhi's borders? What is happening at Kashmiri Gate? What are the different nalas of Delhi doing? What was its original purpose? Why isn't the Bhatkal Lake getting enough water? What happened to the sources of the canals that used to reach the Bhatkal? Why is the millennium city of Gurgaon getting flooded? And just a few kilometers away, whether it's Sultanpur or Bhatkal, several water bodies don't have a drop of water. How are they bone dry? What has the underground metro system in Delhi done to the step wells? And what is all the larger landscape modification done to water bodies? When we are building an underground metro system, are we also thinking about groundwater? Are we also making way to ensure that we actually reconnect our water bodies, canal system, stormwater drains? 100% we require the metro in Delhi. I'm a personal beneficiary of that. Definitely not against the metro system. But when you're building that metro, what was the environmental impact assessment? What was the thought given to water table in Delhi? What was the thought given to redirect stormwater to structures which would now not get water because of a concrete belt that is built underground, let's say 10 feet, 30 feet, 40 feet below ground? And we have in some places multiple layers of underground construction. All of this needs to be given a thought when we're talking about floods. Floods is not about that day when it rains and that day when water reaches our homes. Flood management or drought mitigation is about water management. It's about hydrological habitat management. And as young students, each of you has a responsibility to make these as a topic of discussion and bring this out. And I'm truly grateful that you gave me this opportunity. I'm sorry I couldn't turn on my video because of network issues. I'll leave you with one thought. In 2015, when there was massive rains in Chennai, uh, amidst the flooding, a gentleman called me and he said, Arun, you spoke so much about rainwater harvesting during the summer. I conserved rainwater so much. Now it's in my kitchen, in my bedroom, in my hall, it's everywhere. I don't know what to do. And that's actually where we've come to. We don't have water during the summers, and we have water in abundance during the monsoons, and we constantly have one mode to just blame the government, whoever is in power, whether it's this party, that party, whether it's this leader, that leader. We have such a government dependent society. In this democracy, we fail to understand that we are part of the government, and we as citizens have a civic responsibility. We dumping our construction debris outside our home into stormwater drains, or we illegally connecting our sewer lines to the stormwater drain, or we generating plastic waste every single day at home and just dumping it elsewhere, is all causing environmental damage, including flooding, including drought situation. That is where individual social responsibility is what is going to help us see through difficult times, including the pandemic. Rather than looking for help outside, it is the time to self help and see if we could go one step further to help others in and around us. No one man, one woman, one organization can save the planet. The planet needs no saving. To survive on the face of this planet, we need a certain discipline. Science and logic should be the basis to that. I congratulate the young student leaders who put together this session, and I sincerely hope I've added some value to your invitation. And I hope to work with all of you on field, volunteering for India and her environment, end of this pandemic, praying for all your safety. Jai Hind.
All right, sir, it was really insightful to hear you and your detailed description. Thank you so much once again, sir, for your worthy time. I am sure that our audience will definitely incorporate your piece of advice in their personal lives. We hope to hear from you in near future as well. That was it for today's episode of Bowl SSC. Reach out to us with any questions, suggestions, and recommendations. Our podcast is telecasted on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and our very own YouTube channel, Enactus Sri Aurobindo College. You can reach out to us on our official social media handles. See you all again next week, Tuesday sharp at 8, with yet another interesting topic and an eminent guest. Till then, take care. Signing off, your host for today, Ishita Jain. Until next time, stay home, stay safe.